In the past few months, Atari has made a few surprising acquisitions. In April, they acquired the rights to the Bubsy franchise. In September, Atari bought AtariAge. And finally, a couple weeks ago, Atari purchased Digital Eclipse. What will these buyouts mean for the future, and what's Atari really trying to do? Well, let's take a look. What's going on? It's Podrez coming at you with another video. Alright, so we're going to be talking about Atari's recent acquisitions. Alright, so if you've seen a couple of my videos and you like what I do, hit that subscribe button right there. Thank you so much for getting me to 10,000 subscribers. Let's head further. And if you want to get yourself a Podrez t-shirt or mug, just go to shop.podrez.net. Anyway, some of these acquisitions are pretty interesting, so stick around. So before we talk about Atari's acquisitions, we should discuss who Atari actually is, because it's not the same group of people from the late 70s and early 80s. I made a whole video on what happened to the original Atari, definitely check that one out, but to summarize, Atari got into some financial issues and their assets would be sold to Hasbro. But then Hasbro would be bought out by Infogrames, who then decided to embrace the Atari name. So really, it's Infogrames running things now, but they decided to build their business around Atari. It's interesting that they decided to do this because Atari is mainly just a relic from the past. I've said this before, but it would be like buying out Kmart and deciding to use the Kmart name. But to be fair, there is still some love for Atari, and this YouTube channel is proof of that. There are still some die-hard fans of Atari, and I believe Infogrames knows that. So with access to Atari's franchises, there's two options that you can choose from. Either one, release a few occasional compilations that feature Atari's older titles and accommodate that audience, or two, try to re-establish Atari as one of the bigger game companies. And it seems like Infogrames, or rather Atari, is going the latter route, because in April, an interesting announcement was made. Atari would acquire 100 plus game franchises, including Bubsy. Most of these 100 plus franchises are unknown, but there's a few that are mentioned, like Hardball and Demolition Racer. Most of these I've never heard of, and the ones that haven't been revealed yet are probably nothing special. I mean, if they were, Atari probably would not have put the spotlight on Bubsy. So why would Atari acquire a bunch of IPs? Well, there's a good reason for it. Pretty much all of Atari's own IPs are not super recognizable and only appeal to a small audience. To compare, when Nintendo makes a new Mario game or when Sega makes a new Sonic game, there's an audience that's interested in both of them. But if Atari makes a new Centipede game, there's not going to be a big audience for that. Atari knows this, so they're trying to acquire more IPs to even out the playing field. With that said, there's not that much demand for Bubsy. The previous games in the franchise were not super well liked, and the 2019 release on the Switch got very average reviews. I'll be the first to admit that the 16-bit games are not that bad. The first game is a decent platformer, but held back by bad controls and one-hit deaths. With a couple small changes, this could have been a great title. The second game improved the controls and give you multiple hits, so in that sense it's better, but the game is too maze-like and complex, and I prefer the simplicity of the first game. So I do think a good Bubsy game by Atari is definitely possible. But still, while acquiring a bunch of unpopular franchises is a step in the right direction, it doesn't really accomplish much. It's important that this happened, however, because it proves that Atari is not just trying to hide behind their older games, they're actually trying to release new ones. Now let's talk about the buyout of AtariAge. For those who don't know, AtariAge is basically an encyclopedia for anything Atari. They have pretty much everything you need, like box scans, copies of instruction manuals, a rarity guide, and general information about every console by Atari, along with every game on each platform. Not only that, but they have a big community full of developers that make homebrew titles for Atari consoles. I actually find this acquisition pretty funny because prior to the buyout, AtariAge had every ROM available for download for every Atari console, except for Activision titles. But now that Atari is in charge, all the ROMs have been removed from the site. Pretty unfortunate for people like myself, but I get why Atari did this. They make money off compilations and plug-and-plays, so having all the ROMs available for anyone to download doesn't make much sense from their perspective. Anyway, I do think this is a good acquisition. AtariAge has a really talented group of developers, and having them on Team Atari is a great move. Maybe this will help the production of homebrew titles, which will take pressure off of AtariAge so that they don't have to handle it themselves. This could also mean that homebrew titles from AtariAge will start showing up on official compilations, which would be cool. And finally, maybe Atari will recruit some AtariAge developers for official projects in the future, which would be interesting. This acquisition has a lot of potential for very positive things, so I think it was a great decision. The only downside is that you have to find your ROMs elsewhere. Now let's talk about Atari buying Digital Eclipse. This company is mainly known for their ability to make emulated versions of classic arcade games. Quite a few companies have recognized their great work and hired them to work on re-releasing classic games. One example is Namco, who hired them to make Namco Museum 50th Anniversary. Their version is one of the best ones because it actually uses the arcade ROMs, which no other Namco Museum game had ever done. More recently, they made the Cowabunga collection, which features all the classic Ninja Turtles games, both the console and arcade versions. This is a fantastic collection of games, and they really went the extra mile here. And finally, they made Atari 50, which is an excellent collection of classic Atari titles. I made a video on this one, so be sure to check it out. I'll summarize it though. It's a very unique collection that has a huge lineup of games, even for consoles that you don't usually see on Atari compilations. This collection really shows what Digital Eclipse is capable of because the emulation for the games is near perfect. Even the games that use special controllers somehow work flawlessly on the Switch, and I'm impressed they were able to pull this off. But not only are there old games, but Digital Eclipse even threw in some reimagined versions, so clearly they're capable of creating new work as well. I highly recommend picking this one up if you're an Atari fan. Digital Eclipse has made other Atari compilations in the past, including Atari Anthology. This is another fantastic collection of games, and the space theme goes really well with the Atari universe. So as we can see, Atari and Digital Eclipse have some prior rapport. Of all the acquisitions by Atari, this one definitely surprises me the most. I didn't think Atari was in a position to acquire a company like this. I'm not a business expert, but usually we see bigger businesses acquiring smaller ones. I would have thought Digital Eclipse was a much bigger and more successful company than present-day Atari, but maybe I'm wrong. So what does this do for Atari? Well, Digital Eclipse has done a really good job with their compilations, and it's clear the company has a lot of talent within it. Atari buying them out means they now have access to that talent, which means Atari can make better compilations in the future. Half of Atari's business is re-releasing their older games, so having Digital Eclipse on their team is nice for that. Let's talk about the Atari 2600 Plus because there's one unanswered question about it. It still hasn't been revealed what emulator Atari plans on using for it. Some people think it will use Stella, which is a very well-known Atari 2600 emulator, but others think Atari might build one in-house. This would be a great time to get Digital Eclipse involved with the project because emulation is what they're good at. With them in the picture, maybe we'll get way better compatibility with games than what Retron 77 delivered. So with all these acquisitions, what is Atari trying to do? Well, it's clear that Infogrames isn't just trying to make a few Atari compilations for a quick buck. They're going all in on the Atari branding and they're trying to restore its former glory. Infogrames is putting all their eggs in the Atari basket. They don't want to just re-release Atari's older games, they want to make new ones as well, and they made that clear when they purchased Bubsy and the other IPs. And now they have the resources from AtariAge and the talent from Digital Eclipse to assist them with their goals. Hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, hit that like button. If you enjoy this type of content, hit the subscribe button for more content. Both of these things really help the channel grow. If you have anything to share, feel free to leave a comment. I read every single comment on this channel, and I'm pretty good at replying back. Anyway, have a good one.